Welcome to Centerville City Council meeting here on January 2nd, 2018. Council meetings now in session. So we're looking forward to that. Out of the pan and into the fire, right? So we will start. Help me out here. Roll call. We're all present. We're all present and accounted for. Okay, perfect. We are going to start first with the prayer and then Pledge of Allegiance, and our prayer will be given by Councilwoman Ivy.
Our Father in heaven, as we bow together tonight, we are so grateful for the blessings that Thou hast bestowed upon this community. We're grateful for the prosperity that we enjoy, grateful for the freedom that we have. We're grateful for the opportunity for self-government, grateful for the beginning of this new year, and grateful for this new mayor and his enthusiasm. We're grateful for our first responders and for all those who contribute in any way to the betterment of our community. We pray at this time for Thy Spirit to attend us, that we may have wisdom, that we may have peace, that we may have insight into those things that we're discussing. Please bless our first responders, that they may be protected, help them in all that they do, and bless their families for the sacrifice that they make. We love Thee, Father, and we pray for Thy continued blessing upon us, and we do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Pledge of Allegiance. I'll stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, this evening we have some special recognitions which we're excited about. The Tingey family is here with us, and we are grateful for their service to our city. This is something that, since Mayor Cutler was working with them on, that I wanted to turn time over here to Mayor Cutler to be able to tell all that happened here and all that the Tingey's family has done for the city. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. You really are getting rid of me, but I just wanted to take a minute to thank the Tingey family for their generosity in donating funds for this pavilion. I think it's a wonderful way to recognize the great contribution that the Tingey family has made to Centerville over the years. And I really appreciate it. It'll be a place where families can come and enjoy some time together and make memories. And would love to have Elder Tingey introduce your siblings and maybe take a minute to tell us why you wanted to do this. And we certainly appreciate Elder Tingey's contribution. He wrote a chapter in the Centennial book and has done a lot for Centerville. And we'll thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Cutler, and thank you, new Mayor Wilkinson and council members. Let me introduce my family that are here. My wife, I was seated next to her. My uncle Cal Tingey is my father's youngest brother alive. They live in Centerville. His wife Sherry. My sister Merlin is from Salt Lake, and my son Bill lives in Kaysville. My wife and I live in Bountiful. Just a brief moment on my parents. Bill and Sylvia Tingey. They were married in June of 1932, and my mother was not yet 18. My father was a returned missionary. This was the bottom of the Depression, as you would not remember, but know. Their first job was in Cedar City. He had a job for $75 a month. He was given as a wedding present by my grandfather, or Cal's father, a cow and 2 piglings. And my grandfather had a driver drive them to Cedar City with the cow and 2 pigs in the back and their furniture behind that. They worked all summer in Cedar City. At the end of the summer, the farmer was unable to pay them 1 cent. So they returned to Centerville. The only thing different was that the 2 pigs were bigger. And he worked for his father, my grandfather, Wesley Earl Tingey, that next year for $1 a day, $28 a month. And then he began to farm and acquired property here in Centerville. And they had 10 children. I'm the oldest of the 10 children. 9 are living. 3 live in Utah, others live in Arizona, Nevada, California, Washington, and Calgary, Canada. They have 56 grandchildren. We did a head count in August of last year, and they have 473 descendants. By this year, it'll exceed 500. The property where this pavilion and soccer field is located is a 6-acre pasture that we bought in 1940. It had a beautiful freshwater pond on the west side. In pioneer days, that was used in the wintertime to cut ice and store it in basements with straw for summer use when they had no electricity, of course. While I was growing up in the 40s and 50s, this was a skating pond in the wintertime, and all Centerville youth would go down there and skate. We used it for cattle, for milk cows, and horses. Just in conclusion, last summer, my siblings and I, the 9 of us, had a sibling reunion, and we talked of how good Centerville has been to our family. Our family identifies with Centerville. We held family reunions every 2 years since 1976, starting here, and we finally migrated to a larger place. But we thought it was time to give something back, and this came out of that discussion, and so we're honored to fund the cost of a pavilion to be located on the west side of the soccer field, actually right where the pond used to be. And it will be known as the William W. quote, Bill, close quote, and Sylvia Tingey Pavilion. And we look forward to that being a nice location for years to come for Centerville residents to enjoy as they enjoy the parks and the soccer field. And incidentally, the north 10 acres of the park was property we sold about 20 years ago to make the park. So we feel a little bit invested in Centerville. But thank you for recognizing and accepting this gift. Thank you very much. Any questions?
I just want to give you a hand.
Could I add, Mayor, that we expect to construct this pavilion this year. This is 2018 now. So this year, as we, in connection with doing the landscaping as well, so that that park expansion area can be used starting next year for the playing on those fields, and maybe the pavilion will be in use before next year, but at least the playing fields will come along next year for actual use. Thank you.
Thank you, Tingey family. Thank you for all that came. Thanks so much for the generous donation. Next on the agenda, we want to recognize, we have Marcia Morrow, who is here, who has worked for the city for a number of years. How many years?
I think it's 26.
26 years. That's commendable. And she is retiring here on the 14th.
13th.
How it is? 13th. And I'm going to turn some time over to our city manager, Steve Thacker.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a privilege to share a few things about Marcia. Marcia doesn't like the limelight, so this is probably embarrassing for her. But thank you for putting up with us, Marcia. It has been 26 years. She served as the deputy city recorder for 21 of that, or 21 of that. And then the last 5 years or so as the city recorder. I've been privileged to work with her for the last 20 years, almost, of that, and have come to know Marcia as extremely loyal, steady, calm, doesn't get too excited, and that's good in this business. Some significant things have been accomplished while she's been the city recorder and deputy recorder. I'll mention a few of those. One is she and Marilyn finally convinced me that we needed to do document imaging some years ago, and it has certainly proven its value, and that was something I can credit to their influence, that we have now imaged all the official documents of the city up to this point, and now it's just going forward and doing everything from this point forward. But years and years of minutes and ordinances and all those other, the staff reports even, right? For the meetings for years back, and many, many times we have asked Marcia to get on the system and research with keywords and find staff reports and minutes, those kind of things that have been so valuable. I will say that Marcia also had an impact on us moving to electronic meeting packets, but wasn't a very pleasant way for her to do that. She was delivering the hard copies one day of the meeting packets and unfortunately fell on the driveway or steps of one of our council members and broke her hip. And that just added impetus to the fact that we need to move to an electronic packet here. And so we've been doing that since then. And then in the last couple of years, she has been the one a key person to implement Mayor Cutler's new program, Lunch with the Mayor, which involves the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders of the local elementary schools 4 times throughout the school year. Some of those students come to City Hall and have a lunch with the mayor, the fire chief, and the police chief. And she's been the key one organizing that, and Mayor Wilkinson wants to continue that program during his term. So I appreciate Marcia's service, her support of me. I can't say enough about that. Thank you, Marcia. And we have a plaque for you. The things on it are things I've just shared, so we won't read that again to you, but we'd like you to come up and receive from the mayor this plaque and our appreciation. I asked her if she wanted to make a few remarks, but have you decided to do that, Marcia?
You're welcome to make remarks as you pass that microphone, Marcia.
So do you need help with those stairs?
No.
I failed to mention, so while she's walking back, I'll just note that she did receive 2 critical designations through her educational efforts while she was serving with the city. One was her certified municipal clerk designation, and then later her master municipal clerk designation. So she certainly prepared herself for this role.
We knew you'd give in.
I might add one more thing. I and the city attorney were instrumental in getting vote by mail.
Oh, yes.
And I truly appreciate that.
The camera wasn't facing Lisa. Would you do that again? I've never seen Lisa do a happy dance in her chair before, so.
That's right. These two, Lisa and Marcia, were the pushers on that, and I'm grateful that they were able to convince the council to do that.
Well, I've enjoyed working here. And I won't say more because I'll cry.
Thanks again. You can come visit anytime.
We will have by the way, we're going to have a luncheon for the employees next week, and as council members, you're invited. If you let me know later if you plan to come, we'll include you in the count, okay?
That'll be great. All right, we're at the point where we have an open session. Any member of the public is welcome to come to a microphone. And we encourage you to keep your comments to 2 minutes. If there's any comments from the floor, speak now, forever hold your peace.
Till next time.
That's right, till next time. Okay, we will close the open session then, if there's since there's no comments, and we will move to minutes review and acceptance. I wasn't mayor at that time, so I'll let the council comment and any changes to the minutes that any of you see.
I wasn't here either, but I was just wondering why we didn't have page numbers on this draft. And then I noticed what I thought was probably a typo on page 2, line 42, preparation and submittal of a final linen subdivision plat. Is that the correct term there?
Marcia, I think we do.
Yeah, you could just take out the word linen.
Okay.
That's an old-fashioned word, right?
Also known as Mylar.
Okay.
You're gonna miss them.
There are page numbers on my draft. They must have been added after we put it on the Novus.
Yeah, on the digital draft that I have there or not. So. Okay.
Kenzie, she added a header, and I guess that took
The preliminary draft header took the spot where it normally would show the page number. So if we just want to make a note of that for, yeah.
Any other amendments, changes?
Motion to accept the December 5th, 2017 minutes as stated with the adjustment to add page numbers to the final recorded copy.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. All in favor?
And the deleting of the word linen from the minutes.
Okay. Once again, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are accepted with those noted changes. Thank you. Next up is the summary action calendar. And this is 3 items on the summary action calendar. Appointment of the city recorder, resolution number 2018-1, appointment of city treasurer resolution number 2018-2, and approval of recording secretary agreements.
And there's 2 parts to that.
Okay.
The current recording secretaries is one part of that, and then the new one being contracted with Avalon Comley. So it's actually 4 items on that agenda, that calendar.
So what have we looked at these? Is there discussion on these? What?
I didn't have any discussion items. Unless someone else does, I would make a motion that we approve the items on the summary action calendar as stated.
Second.
There's been a motion to approve the items on the summary action calendar is stated and has been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Mayor, could I note that we have our city treasurer here as well, Jolene Jackson? Jolene, how long have you been treasurer? 26 years. Let's look at that, 26 years. Came at the same time, huh? You and Marcia? Pretty much. Oh, okay.
Thanks
Thank you for
being here
what you
with us,
do too, Jolene.
Okay, next we're to the item number 3 on our agenda. This is a zoning code amendment, and we have we have Cassie here from the staff to present on this agenda item.
Happy New Year, everyone. Mayor Wilkinson, welcome.
Happy New Year.
Lots of change happening today. It's exciting. All right, so for this zoning text amendment, this is regarding agricultural lots in the hillside overlay. A few months ago, the residential lots were amended, so it's more of a tiered approach, so the width will change with the percentage of the slope. And so both the applicant, who I don't think is here tonight, and the staff both agree that there was a little bit of discrepancy regarding how residential lots and agricultural lots were treated within the hillside overlay. So we just want to fix those changes so they can match each other. So now the proposed lots in the hillside overlay in agricultural zones will remain at the base zone, so 80 feet wide, if it's less than 10% of a slope. If it goes beyond 10% slope, so between 10 and 15, it would go up to 100 feet at the width, and then beyond 15% slope would go up to 125% width for lots at the setback. So the width, we want extra width in the hillside overlays for those retaining systems, and we can also incorporate the setbacks, and the property owner can develop their lots in a way that the retaining systems remain in place, so the wider the lot for higher slope. So we did a similar thing with the residential lots a few months ago, and we just want to maintain that fairness between the zoning code and the hillside overlay. And so this will help with the developers have a little bit more flexibility in their lot sizes, but maintaining those retaining systems as well.
So question.
Mm-hmm.
Minimum lot size in the agricultural is half acre?
True.
So that's not changing, and what is the minimum width? Is it standard 125 feet across all of them now?
So it's standard 80 feet, so anything less than a 10% slope would remain at 80 feet width required, but it's included in the half acre minimum lot size, but it's a minimum width as well. So anything greater than a 10% slope will have to go wider than that.
And what is it now?
Right now it's across the board, no matter what slope it is, it's 125 feet required in the hillside overlay. So whether you're a 5% slope or a 20% slope in the hillside overlay, it's required 125 feet wide. And so that doesn't allow a lot of, room for flexibility in it. It's not necessarily necessary to have lots that wide when there's not a slope that steep.
I just want to make a comment that I think this is exactly the kind of common sense solution that I love to see. An ordinance got put in place, and there was a good reason for the ordinance to have special rules and exceptions in the hillside overlay zone for these reasons. But then to be able to tweak it to make more sense is perfect. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to comment that it's the kind of thing I wish that I saw a little more of, like when we're talking about accessory buildings and possible flag lot ordinances and things like that, to have that flexibility to have sliding scales and things like that. So I appreciate what this does.
Any more questions for Kathy?
I was going to wait till after the public hearing portion.
Okay, George. Thanks, Kathy. You're going to hang out for a couple minutes?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. The applicant, I'd heard they may be here, or a representative, but I don't see anybody from the applicant's perspective. Am I correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. We were told that Scott Bowling might be here in lieu of the applicant as his rep, but we don't see him, so.
So if that's the case, we'll move to the public hearing portion. Public, any comments from the public? George, you want to comment before we enter a motion, or?
As soon as you close the public hearing,
Okay.
then I'll do that.
All right, since no comments from the public, we will close the public hearing, and we will move on to any further questions before we enter a motion.
I just did want to get some clarification on what was any rationale given to the planning commission as to what generated the original 125-foot setback and why that was standard across the hillside overlay regardless of slope, or did they just?
I don't know the reasoning behind it, to be honest, but there was that discrepancy of residential lots would have to change with the slope, but then it just said, it was just kind of funny wording in the coding that all agricultural lots shall maintain at 125 feet. So I don't know the background behind it.
Fair enough. I mean,
Sorry.
I'm not sure. It could be nothing more than a knee-jerk reaction that agriculture and residential aren't the same, therefore they must be different in code.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if there was any specific logic given. Not that I see any specific logic in keeping it at 125, just curious to know what the thought process was.
Sorry.
That was the whole question.
Further questions of a motion?
I'm not sure I understand enough detail to know what motivates it. But if you look at lot size, half an acre is approximately 22,000 square feet. And at 125, that means it's 176 by 125. At 80, it's 275 by 80. And 100, and it's 220. Based on personal experience and based on some things we've seen in front of the council, see a lot of difficulties in having tremendously deep properties because of the access of the rear and the other things. So I need to be persuaded a little bit more that this makes sense. I guess I would prefer to see the agricultural stay wider so that I don't have such deep properties with the attendant difficulties that creates. Now, I can be persuaded there's not a ton of logic here other than making it consistent with the residential lots. But that's kind of where I sit.
So
I heard Tammy's comment, and I know I'm going the other direction, but that's
it's
kind
fine.
of
I just want to make sure. So you understand that a regular agricultural lot has a minimum width frontage of 80. And so then the 125 was just placed for the hillside, right? And the reasoning behind that is, well, if you have hillside, you have slope. And so you need more side yard space to take care of the retaining needs, and also so that if you have one house here and one house here, it's not closer to that setback, it's not scrunched this way, because then you're towering over the next house. So those are the kinds of thinkings as to why a hillside overlay would require more width than an agricultural lot down in the city. And so this is just saying
But this is going the other direction.
But this is just saying we respect the premise of why the hillside overlay increased width got put in place, but we're asking you to just tweak it so that if there really isn't that much slope difference, then the reason you placed the 125 doesn't exist hardly as much. And so we're just asking you to do this sliding scale to make the problem that you were trying to solve actually get solved at the appropriate scale that the problem exists.
But we are taking it down by almost a third. Would we maybe want to consider not taking it quite down so far?
So another reason is that the 125 width was standard regardless of slope based on the code, and not all, even though you can be located in the hillside overlay, your property may or may not have that steep of a slope. So really, in reality, while these widths were meant for retaining systems, people were essentially just building bigger homes, and they weren't really serving their purpose and function. So we think that it's really only needed of that wider lot when there's a slope. And so this is only in the hillside overlay, so that's why we decided to change the width based on the percentage of slope, which is how you determine that.
Which is similar to what we did a month or two ago with the residential.
Yeah.
They had a tiered system, and so now we're just adding a tiered to the agriculture.
Yeah, but they're not half-acre lots.
No, but the frontages, I think, are also different. They're wider frontages. When you compare the hillside tiered system for agricultural, aren't the frontages still wider than the residential hillside?
Yeah, so residential, the minimum
cases?
width is 60.
Yeah, 60, 80, and 100
Yeah.
versus 80, 100, and 125.
Right.
So we're not shrinking them down to residential size lots. We're keeping them wide, but in an agricultural size sense.
So I'm a little confused about why we need to worry about it with the ag lots. Can we look at a map and see what we're really looking at? Jake,
This
could
is
you pull
actually
one
an
up?
applicant-driven application because there is a subdivision proposal in the agricultural zone where this came up, and that there's not a significant amount of slope on their property, but they would be required to meet the 125-foot width, which again, as we've said, was to provide for that steep slope, but there's not a lot of slope on it. So they
Are
would
they
fall within
trying,
the.
are they trying to retain the ag designation?
Yes,
Yeah.
they would like to
That's-
keep it
that's
ag.
their
Yeah, they could
motivation.
try to go for a rezone, but they actually wanted to keep it in the agricultural low.
And in this case particularly, all of the lots were already over half acre, so it wasn't a size of the lot issue, it was simply the width that to get to that 125 feet was causing them a little bit of trouble.
Could I also note this, that in this case, the applicant is developing a dead-end street into a cul-de-sac, and so when you have a cul-de-sac arrangement, your frontages end up in a wedge shape. And so I think that's probably what motivated him to request something like this, because on a cul-de-sac, your front is going to be...
That makes more sense.
That
makes a lot more sense than what I read in this.
So I would make a motion at this time to approve 1242-040. Ordinance number 2018-02. Changes to the width standards for agricultural lots within the hillside overlay zone.
Do we have a second on that motion? We have an amended motion?
So in this case, Mr. Mayor, procedure is to state that it's failed for lack of a second, and I guess discussion continues.
Right. So the motion's failed for lack of a second. Further discussion on it?
So in this applicant-driven situation, I guess what I'm trying to do is quantify, if things stayed as they are, what does it do to the applicant's proposal? Do they lose the ability to place a home? Or do they render a lot unusable in this cul-de-sac environment that they're looking to do? Mostly I'm looking at that not so much as how does it benefit this specific applicant, but I'd like to see how the real-world impact would approach other lots that are in similar areas in the city that are in ag on the hillside overlay. Is that too much of a question in one go, or I'm not sure if I stated that well.
I'm not sure if they would lose a whole lot, but they would definitely have to do some reconfiguration with the street, with the cul-de-sac. Right now, they're really close to being at the 125 width, and all of them are obviously over half-acre lots. But to get all four of them at that 125 was a little bit difficult. I think, 2 or 3 of them weren't quite making it with his configuration to keep those lots at the same size that he wants them to. So there would definitely have to be some street and lot readjustment.
Sure.
So we've got the contrast between the planning for a development, and I was not aware of the details Steve gave us, and the impact on an ongoing basis. But if you stop and you look at it, and I have no idea, I haven't seen any kind of a plat, but if you go from 125 width, that means 250 gives you the ability for 3 lots as opposed to 2 lots. So it probably has a significant impact on the number of lots.
And I would suggest that if you want some more explanation or information, that you could table this and have the applicant here next time, as well as Corey, if you would like.
I'd feel more comfortable with that. I know the hillside overlay is a sensitive thing, and
Very.
I'm in favor of being fair, but I'm nervous to adjust the entire overlay based on the situation of one subdivision. That's a little much for me all at once. So I move that we table this to next time so that we can have some additional information.
Second.
So there's a motion and a second to table ordinance number 2018-2, agricultural lots within the hillside overlay zone.
Before we vote, one thing that would be helpful for if we table this to the next meeting, and this is what I'm asking, if it's going to be practical, is given the difference, this is going to be a GIS nightmare, but given the difference between the two, if we were to change the setbacks to what the new ordinance is, how many lots become developable that are not currently developable? Is that even doable? Basically, I'm looking for what is in ag in the hillside that's undeveloped. It's kind of a nebulous request because you don't have anything in front of you as far as a applicant driven, but I'm just trying to see what the knock-on effect is if we were to say yes. What does that do to potential developments that have a 15-degree slope that's impacting them, or a 10-degree slope that's, or sorry, 10-degree that's impacting them currently?
So are you asking for this specific piece of land, or in general?
In general.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think we could certainly get you the information of how many agricultural lots are left in the hillside, but most of these property owners would just rezone to residential. And most of these areas, the general plan calls for residential low. So we can get that, but just know that they would just rezone it to residential low.
Right, so what I'd be looking at there is maybe it's the number of lots remaining and the topography, so I can at least see what the elevation looks like.
Number of lots, and yeah. And
but I will emphasize that point, and that was something I was going to say as well, is that here we are in an area where there's not much developable land anyway, and we do have the overlay for a reason, but in the general plan that would be really acceptable to come in for a zone change for residential low. Anyway, so we're already getting a good product here for it to stay agricultural with large lots and the 80 foot at a minimum width, which is more than residential low. And then the other point that I wanted to make that maybe could be discussed next time is that there are other areas in the city that aren't in the hillside overlay that have 10% slope or greater. And we're not making any increased width adjustment for them. And so why not be reasonably flexible here?
Well, I think the key difference, if I was to ask the public on that, is they can't see those other areas necessarily as prominently as they can the hillside. So just based on the sensitivity, just the word hillside will, if it goes out tonight, we're talking about hillside more, there'll probably be some reaction to that. So I'd like a little bit more information just so I get a better idea. I would hate to work on specifically solving a problem for one individual only to create problems for future councils with hillside related issues. Or us for that matter in 6 months from now when somebody decides something now fits that didn't prior to.
Any further discussion?
And I agree, but at the same point in time, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot by getting a flood of requests to go residential. So I mean that both sides.
I think we're pushing developers more to be more likely to come in for a reason.
I hear what you're saying, and that's, but I think it's important to understand the impact.
So.
Okay. Motion on the table?
Okay, motion on the table, and there's a motion and a second to table this amendment until next meeting, correct?
Yeah.
Do we
And
need
if you could
individual-
put in that as well, to direct staff to get the council the number of properties left in the agricultural zone and the percentage slopes in
That was
those
your motion,
areas.
Yes, it was. Yes, if you could add that, that would be great. Thank you, Katie.
Okay, is this individual vote, or can we do it by yea and nay?
Do individual.
Okay,
Nay.
all in favor, say yea?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Nay?
Nay.
So it looks like the ayes have it,
Robin?
Yeah, aye.
so it's tabled to next meeting.
Did you ask for a roll call vote? I thought I heard that.
I thought I heard Tammy ask for a roll call.
Let's just do a roll call on that.
Okay,
Nay.
Aye.
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 4-1, tabled till next meeting. Item number 4, public hearing, municipal code and zoning code amendments, deferral agreements. This staff presentation is going to be by Lisa Romney.
Yes, thank you. This is actually a council request to clean up our ordinances. We address deferral agreements in 2 different sections in Title 10 of our municipal code as well as in the zoning code. And just to refresh your memory, last year the council approved a number of deferral agreements, but typically when a developer or a property owner comes in to develop their property, they need to put in the public improvements like the sidewalk, the curb and gutter, and the street. It's still staff's recommendation that that's the standard that people come in and put those in, because that's how we get the city built out. But sometimes there's good reason why a sidewalk might not be needed, and so our code talks about allowing them to defer that improvement, and so that's the deferral agreement. So I went back and looked at this request from the council came the last time you approved a deferral agreement. I think it was the Samuelson deferral, and said, hey, tighten that up, because there were some discrepancies between the two. So I looked at what we have in our municipal code versus what we have in the zoning ordinance, and met with staff, mainly the public works director and community development, and we talked about ways to solve this. The preference is to put the deferral agreement in Title 10, which is not the zoning code. And then in the zoning code, just delete everything and put all of that procedure and all of the factors in Title 10, which is our streets, because it is up to the public works director to prepare the staff report and analyze this kind of thing, rather than a zoning issue, should the improvements go in. So with this proposed ordinance, you'll see those edits in the zoning code where I just took everything out and refer back to Title 10. But what I do want to highlight for you and have you think about, I think the most important thing in these edits is what standards, when these deferral agreements come back to the city council, what standards do you want to look at, and how strict do you want to be for when an applicant can get approval of a deferral agreement. So I'm looking on page 2 of the agreement, and currently this is what's proposed, is that, oh, actually, sorry, the factors are on page 3. Yeah, F.
In the ordinance itself, you're talking about?
Right, yes,
Okay.
sorry. Page 3, subsection F, these are the required factors. So number 1 is already in your code, and it just says the property has to be a legally conforming lot. Okay, no question on that. I agree with that one. Number 2, the lot has to have frontage on a public street. That's already in your code. I agree with that one. But the next one that we've struggled with, right now the proposal is that no street improvements exist on the same side of the street contiguous to the lot or parcel in one or both directions. So that's your first choice. So if I'm looking at, my side of the street, if there's a sidewalk that way but not that way, they could ask for deferral. So that's one option. You could just say in both directions if you want to be a little more strict, but it says one or both. And then I put in more wiggle room for you, unless approved by the city council based on good cause, because this was the Carlson example where there were sidewalks, I think. or maybe it was the one across the street, there were sidewalks in direction, but they had a corner lot. And then this one went to a cul-de-sac where it didn't go. So I'm giving you some wiggle room. If you don't want the wiggle room, take out unless otherwise approved by the council and just make it a straight, nope, if you have to have, you know, no sidewalks either side. And then I also added, or that the lot or parcel is in an area of the city specifically designated where sidewalks are not required. We haven't done this yet, but I left it in there because this is the direction that the Planning Commission and I think staff would like to go eventually, is coming up with a map and some areas of your town site, you know, where we really don't have a lot of sidewalks, is just say, you know what, we're not going to do sidewalks there, and you don't even have to get a deferral. That's not really an option because we haven't designated any areas, but I added that in. So you could take that out if you want to come back later and when we do that. And then number 4 is that the lot or parcel is not within a recorded subdivision. Okay, now this probably was the Carlson one where the trigger is they were remodeling and their house didn't have any sidewalk, but they were remodeling, and so that triggered putting in the public improvements. And they were in a subdivision, and so when they came to ask for the deferral, technically they wouldn't qualify because you are in a subdivision. So then I added the wiggle room, unless otherwise approved by the council based upon good cause. That one seemed to have good cause, even though they were in a subdivision, because there were some ADA issues. There was also a slope issue.
Yeah,
That
I
was
think
the
at least
Butters.
that wasn't
Oh.
the Carlson
Oh,
case. It was another one where the front yard had a steep slope.
Right, with the
Right,
steep.
that one was the Butters.
The Butters,
Carlson,
yes, the
yeah.
Butters.
Yeah.
And so that one we said, hey, that doesn't make sense. So I added the wiggle room. And then, but then I added back in, but no deferral of improvements shall be allowed as part of a new subdivision development. Because what we don't want is when a developer actually comes in, like Brighton Homes or something, in our staff meetings, they're always trying to get us to delete sidewalks or defer improvements, and our standard response is no, when you build a subdivision, you put in the sidewalk and you put in the improvements, and so we're not going to waive them with a new subdivision. But I will say this Rigby Court one that's coming on Jennings Lane, we might want to put more wiggle room there because they are actually doing a cul-de-sac, and they're going to put the sidewalk in the cul-de-sac, but the neighbors, there's no sidewalk on Jennings Lane. And the neighbors want to allow them to defer it on Jennings Lane. But the Planning Commission said, no, we're going to dig our heels in on that one and say, no, if you're doing a brand new subdivision, but this would include even lot splits, you have to put in the public improvements. So I know that was more detail than you wanted, but there's a lot of areas, if you want to be strict, we can take things out, or if you want some wiggle room, it's in there.
Any questions for her?
I appreciate the wiggle room. Good job.
I really appreciate the wiggle room too. I think you did an excellent job.
Okay, good. Agreed. I didn't know if you wanted it to be really strict and make it difficult, but I think every time these come to you, they seem to have good reason, and we weren't, you know.
Having a hard time.
We needed some.
Okay, there's no applicant on this, but this is a public hearing. Is there any comments from the public? No comments on the public. Any further questions?
So if you want to.
Wait, let me close the public hearing first. I'm going to get that one down.
Great.
By the end of the night.
And I do want to say the zoning portion of this did go to the Planning Commission, and they recommended approval of that portion, so.
Okay, so the public hearing's closed. Any further comments?
I just want to clarify that when it says here in the heading, the city council must determine that there's good cause for deferral, but that still gives us, it's the judgment call still.
Exactly.
So the
I think that
assumption-
would cover the Butters situation where you say, no, there is good cause because it would be very problematic with the slope.
But the assumption is we're going to require the sidewalk unless in our judgment there's good cause, but this doesn't force us. to not
Exactly, and it's
require.
still staff's recommendation. So on a couple of these last year,
Right.
staff did not recommend the deferral agreement.
Right.
But the council wanted to, and so this would allow you, but it does not force you. If you wanted to agree with staff and say, no, that's not enough of a good cause and we need to get our sidewalks built out, you could deny it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm of the opinion that if you're a developer, you need to shell out for the full development, so I have no problem with that. in terms of good cause, I think that's great. I would actually go a little bit further in stating myself, and I'm just throwing this out, nobody in the council knows I'm about to say this, but there are certain individuals in the community that creating deferral agreement helps them through a financial hardship. One that I would specifically like to state in code, and I do not have verbiage for this at this time, is if you were coming home as a wounded service member and a renovation would trigger the need for sidewalk improvements or public improvements, that is an automatic deferral. That doesn't even need to come to the council. I feel very strongly that if you've served our country and you've come back in less than you went out because of your service to your country, that your community owes you that automatic deferral. That should not even be a matter of discussion.
Further discussion for a motion?
I would not disagree with that, but I'd like to think about and understand the impact, or make sure I understand
Sure.
the impact. I guess then the other question is, if we're going to do it that direction, then we probably ought to do it for any other first responder.
I think I have no opposition to that at all. The language that would go around that simply would be, and this is, in most cases, I think this is probably more symbolic than that we're going to run into this to an actual fact, because we are fairly built out. But I'd like to make sure that those who are serving in those capacities, and I really agree with you, Bill, on first responders as well, if they have suffered significant injury where a remodel is required to their home to accommodate that injury, as a community, we should be in support of an automatic deferral.
And essentially, going back in the history of what we're talking about, the Butter situation, it wouldn't have been covered with this, but the motivation behind the improvement was because of a health or a disease-related issue. So that wouldn't have been covered, but that is a real thing that happens.
Yeah. And I do think that those situations are covered in the language that you have before you. I don't discount the desire of wanting to carve that out, but
it's more very much symbolic. But I think if you look at other areas in government in like at a county level, for example, they have tax rebates available to veterans who have certain levels of disability that are written into code. It's automatic that if they are X percentage of disability, X percentage of property tax rebates, things like that. So the state and the county have some of those in place. I don't know how active they are in terms of how often they get used, but they're there, I think, both from a symbolic and a practical matter. But yeah, Bill, it really is just, there are individuals, I think, we cover it in good cause, but I'd like to state in pretty strong language where our support is for the first responder and veteran community.
I don't disagree with the sentiment, but if Lisa feels right now that what we have before us gives us enough wiggle room that something like that could be included, then what I would feel comfortable with is to approve this as written and then have you further explore and then come and maybe have staff have come more prepared to respond to that before we move. So I don't want to delay moving on this, but I'd want to go ahead and move on this as written. I think that the sentiment is nice, but maybe we could evaluate all of our ordinance, our taxing situation, and maybe carve out some areas that would be more targeted to actually be applied and helpful. If we do it here, then how many other places in our code does it make sense to do it? And then we're inconsistent. If we do it for servicemen or first responders, but not someone who just needs to remodel because of an injury, it just gets pretty sticky to get that specific, I think, in this language.
Lisa, do we run into problems carving out something like that for military or first responders and not doing it for somebody who's just handicapped or was serving in the Peace Corps or that type of thing?
Yeah, I'd probably want to think about how you define that. I mean, certainly we do provide exceptions for service members, and there's a number of federal code that provides that. So it's not necessarily a problem but you would want to consider other areas, or, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
once you brought, because, yeah, and you said.
The sentiment's nice, but I could get concerned about, you know, that extending to, okay, how do we define who's handicapped from what, you know?
Well, the Americans
we
with
run into
Disabilities
problems
Act
with that?
does address some of these. Even under the ADA, you can allow a reasonable accommodation from zoning regulations, and sometimes people will push those as well as a reasonable accommodation for a disability. So there's that's a separate tool, but that's available for others as well.
So was that mentioned in the one that we had last year, the butters? I don't remember that being mentioned.
No, I didn't know if it was a disability. I thought it was just a health issue, but
I thought it was an MS or an MD.
Oh.
I don't remember, but that.
Yeah, I don't recall if we listed that as, maybe we did as a finding.
I don't think we did.
Do we at the point where we have a motion on this yet?
I would make a motion that I'd like to support George's proposal, but I'd like to give Lisa 2 weeks to think about it. Are we opening Pandora's box? Is there a reason that you say, hey, don't do this? I don't.
Well, the box certainly gets bigger if you want me to analyze all of our code and where to put things, but I think I could come up with something for this. It will be a limited
Yeah, I would say narrow focus. I agree with you, Tammy, that it would be worth looking at from a general perspective as to other areas, but on some of them, needs basis, how long did it take us to read the code the first time? So, you know. As much as I support veterans and first responders, I'm not sure that it's prudent for us to necessarily go through every line to find a benefit for those communities or those communities of individuals at this point. But I'm willing to take them on an ad hoc basis as we encounter code that we're changing.
Yeah, but you know, as you provide an exception, you do need to provide some process to that, which additional time would give me time to think about that. It would probably be a city manager or who's going to review that, and what would the factors be to establish, but we can add that in.
Afterwards, I'll give you some ideas on language based on what I've seen at state and county levels.
Perfect. Yeah.
Bill, was that a motion?
Yes, I would motion that we table this, give Lisa 2 weeks to get back to us on the things that we have discussed, and look at it in 2 weeks.
I'll second that.
We have a motion to table this for 2 weeks. Lisa to look at it further as far as code, any other language we need on that. And we have a second as well too. Roll call, Congressman McEwen, we'll start with you.
Thanks for the upgrade, Paul. Aye.
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 Well, sorry, Senate seats open.
Senator, I'm good with
Yeah,
that.
not
No, I'm just kidding.
Councilman McEwen.
You're doing fantastic. I'm giving you too much of a hard time. First day out.
All right, we're to our last public hearing, number 5 on the agenda. Park impact fee amendments. The staff presentation on this is by Steve and Jake, however they want to do it on their end.
Yes, and Jake will do most of it, but let me just remind you that this is pursuant to your request as a council that we review the study from 2012 and determine if an update was in order. And we did, and we agree that costs have increased substantially over, actual costs have been substantially higher than what we estimated in 2012. And so we have been through a process, and I'll let Jake explain what that is.
Well, we're required, and Lisa, correct me on this, we're required, first of all, to do a public notice on the intent to change the impact fee and allow any of those that are affected or to come forth with any suggestions, ideas, that sort of thing. We didn't receive any of those.
We did publish the notice.
But we did publish the notice, but we didn't receive anything, any input. After that, we did prepare what we have here, the amended park impact fee facility plan and impact fee analysis. It's a combined report. And we're required by law to notify at least 10 days beforehand in regularly circulated newspaper, which we use the Davis Clipper, as well as our website. And we're also supposed to put a physical copy out front here at City Hall and the library, and there's a copy down at the library right now. We did all of that before the holidays, actually. What was the I think the 21st is when we got that out there. So we're in compliance with that, right, Lisa? So that was the process. Now, we did talk with Lewis Young about what was the best approach to update this impact fee so that it would truly recover the impact fee eligible costs, especially when it comes to this park, the park expansion, because as you know, the real costs compared to the estimated costs that we did 5 years ago are way off. So this is an update, and this $2,869 is the result of the calculation for that impact fee. That's the maximum that we can charge for that impact fee.
And so you have the option as the council to either leave the impact fee where it is, raise it to the maximum amount supported by the study, or something between those two. You are required to hold a public hearing, which has been scheduled for tonight. But once you act on it, whether that's tonight or later, it's 90 days after you approve the ordinance that it becomes effective. So we're glad to take questions from you about the analysis, the updated plan and analysis.
So on page 13, among other things, it shows Centerville having a park impact fee of $1,200, but a cost of $2,057.
Well, that was our old impact fee.
I understand. So
in 2012, we raised it to the 2,057. So the first 13 pages is the 2012 report, and then the subsequent pages show you the amendments to that report.
So I did misunderstand. We have been charging $2,057.
That's correct.
As opposed to we were just nice guys and charged $1,200 when the cost was $2,057.
Up to that point, in 2012 is when we raised it to 2,057. Yeah.
Okay.
Further questions? Okay. This is a public hearing. Agenda item, any comments from the public? If no public comments, then the public hearing is closed. Any further discussion before a motion? I remember to close the public hearing that time. Thanks. Further discussion?
I would move that we approve ordinance 2018-03 with the amount that the analysis provided of 2857?
2869.
2869.
2869.
Second.
We have a motion for the park impact fees to be increased to 2869 and seconded motion. Should we have let's have a roll call, starting with Councilwoman Meekum this time.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0.
That means then we will bring back a resolution amending the fee schedule. But the 90 days starts from tonight, doesn't it, Lisa? The 90 days, I think, starts from the
Yes.
passage of this ordinance, right?
That's what it says in the ordinance. I'll have to look at how we did it last time when we put it, but I think we're just implementing the ordinance by putting it in the fee schedule, so
Yeah.
I think that'll work.
Do they need any other specific language that you're aware of in this motion to make sure that we're good?
All of that language is actually in the ordinance, so if
Okay.
they just approve
All right.
ordinance.
It's a long ordinance, as you noticed. That was to satisfy all the requirements of the law.
So I would like to ask one last question. Any reason that we know of why Bountiful and Sunset don't have one?
To my knowledge, Bountiful doesn't have any impact fees for anything. Is that right, Kevin? Is that your knowledge? Or Jake?
They own an electric company, so yeah, they do not charge any impact fees.
They're subsidized heavily.
They transfer a couple of $1 million a year from their electric
That's just
system.
a guess.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that that's a guess.
No, that's
my
I would have
understanding.
thought that, but I was curious.
Good question.
So, yeah, they've just chosen to go that way, I guess. They don't have, for years, they haven't had a lot of new development. That may be another reason they haven't had incentive to put one in place. Sunset, I think, my impression of Sunset is that it's a compact city also with really no growth area. So they may have decided, I'm just speculating, they may have decided that there's not a need for it there.
All right, moving on. No more public hearing items. Next item is Schedule 6 on our agenda, fee schedule amendments, employee resident status, and Lisa was going to give us some overview on this.
Okay, yes, this is Resolution 2018-03, amending our fee schedule. This originated with a request from the Employee Association, and the council directed staff at the last meeting in December to come back with some fee schedule amendments with a few revisions to what was requested, but basically providing the employees of Centerville City some benefit of resident status for purposes of determining certain fees. I did not put this on the summary action because I wanted to explain a couple things. I just went ahead and searched in our fee schedule for resident and non-resident. And so there were, whenever we made that distinction, I wanted to address that in this amendment. So the one that you already know about is amending the cemetery and burial fees section. But you have to be a current employee of Centerville to get that resident fee. Then we're amending to allow resident fees for current employees again for park pavilion fees. We did not have a fee schedule. You suggested making a resident status for the rec program as well. And I didn't notice anywhere in the fee schedule where we talk about our recreation program fees, so I had to add a new section in order to provide that benefit. So I just said that our rec program director determines the fees every year, but current employees can get the resident fee for those. But then the last one that we hadn't talked about, we actually make a distinction between residents and non-residents for purposes of fingerprinting. So that is new. You hadn't thought about that. If you don't want to give that benefit, that's fine. I'm not sure it's a huge advantage, but yeah, let's hope not. But I added that in even though we hadn't talked about it. So then we would be consistent, and whenever we said resident, employees would get the resident benefit.
And do we charge more for fingerprinting non-residents?
Yes, we do.
Questions?
I think it's a $5 versus $10 difference. But
I'm with you, Lisa. We'd spend more money discussing it than
so we recommend approval of those revisions.
Motion?
I still, in spite of the fact that I would like to see us recognize residents and employees for a period of time after the end, I recognize the difficulty that creates. So unless there is a groundswell of support for that, I would make a motion that we approve Resolution 2018-03 as prepared.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 2018-03 as prepared. We will do a roll call vote, starting with Councilman Entz.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Beautiful. Resolution passes 5-0. Moving on to Item number 7, and this is a review of the 1250 West Pathway Plan. Specifically, Steve, I think you're going to talk to us about applications. And
I am, but I'm going to invite our city engineer to come forward to one of the microphones. Maybe you come to this one, Kevin, in case you need to point to it and talk about it. This is a follow-up on a conversation we've had already. A letter of intent was submitted in October to Wasatch Front Regional Council to one of their pots of federal money that they award out of, which is called the Transportation Alternatives Program, where they fund pedestrian pathways, bike lanes, et cetera. So our letter of intent back in October indicated that we wanted to do a sidewalk along the west side of 1250 West from Parrish up to 1275 North and put bike lanes on the road in both directions. But as we've discussed this further as staff, we believe the better solution is a multi-use pathway to serve both pedestrians and bicyclists that's on the west side off the road. We have a very wide right-of-way on 1250 West, so we could have a wide pathway to accommodate both and still have areas to plant trees in that area along there. So I've got Kevin here to explain it further and answer questions. What we need to know is whether you're supportive of us going forward with that in our concept report, which is due January 18th. Which is our official funding application.
I think it's a great concept.
I think it's really good.
How close does it end up being to the wall?
To the wall. What do you mean to the wall?
To the freeway wall?
Well, this pathway would go from Parrish.
Oh, it's 1250. Never mind.
1250. Yeah.
I'm on the wrong street.
Maybe show the map there if.
I'm sorry, I was on frontage road.
Oh, you're fine. So there is a map, I think. But 1250 West on the west side of the road. The corner lot is owned by the Wright Development.
So we've got this aerial you can refer to, Kevin.
Yes,
if you'd like.
this. The Wright Development, they've come in for a small subdivision on that corner. So they would be paying for the improvements along their frontage. Proposed 10-foot wide multi-use path with, maybe a 10-foot wide or so park strip. Would leave plenty of room for beautification, as Steve noted. And we would recommend that cross-section be taken all the way down to, maybe in front of Hogan Office Park. There's some trees there. We think we might have to go up against the curb and gutter as we go.
You want to refer to that at all?
Yeah. That would be good. We have plenty of right-of-way, but there's some trees and wetlands along here that we would probably try to, I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah, right there.
So from about this spot through here, we would try to go up against the back of the curb most likely. And then, of course, at the bridge, that sidewalk's up against the back of the curb, and it's 10 feet wide over the Legacy Bridge. And then we would probably try to keep it anywhere where there's kind of a steep side slope. We would try to keep the sidewalk up against the back of the curb. But I think you would get a good long stretch from Parish Lane all the way down to 950 North, which is where the Hogan Office Park is, of a nice wide park strip area where things could be planted and beautified. So that's why the concept plan says that the park strip width may vary 0 feet to, I think we went all the way up to 14 feet. We have 100 feet of right-of-way. It was determined that the west side of the road was better than the east side of the road. A few factors were that we had a developer that would participate, and then of course the sidewalk across the bridge is already on the west side, so those were a couple of things that we weighed in. The TAP funding is not quite as competitive as the STIP, but it is still fairly competitive. There's a lot of applicants, but the TAP and the CMAC were a little more likely to get funds from those sources than the STIP. So,
But in order to, but there is still a lot of competition. In order to make ours somewhat more competitive, we suggest that we have more than the 6.7% match built in there. Part of that match we hope could be satisfied by the developer for along his frontage, paying for that piece, which is estimated to be about $57,000. And then maybe if we had another 40 to 50,000 of RDA money that ultimately we could apply from that Bernard Creek project area for a total match of say 100,000 out of this $450,000 or so estimate now. That would give us like a 22% match. It might make us more competitive. I'll be honest with you, I'm not optimistic that we will get approval on this. At least not this first year particularly, but if we get it on there and we go back again, it might get more favorable in a second round. And we also, we could perhaps benefit from phasing it. Sometimes as they award this money, they're looking for ways to benefit more applicants, and so they ask, are you willing to take less than you're asking for? And we could maybe negotiate that, well, we'd be willing to do part of this now and then try again later for some more. So if you're okay with that approach, we'll go that way.
You told me, Steve, when we met, you're trying to get this application in by when?
Well, it's got to be turned in by January 18th to the Wasatch Front. Yeah. So we didn't want to wait till the 16th to ask you this question. We need to get our application in shape.
Yeah,
Are you
busy.
Okay with that?
That's why we had council meeting tonight, because we thought you'd all like this one. So.
I like it, but I have one hesitation, and that is that Right Development has an ingress on that west side.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And adding a bike lane and pedestrian lane there just makes me.
Well, there's going to be ingress egress in all of the existing properties. So
there is
on the east and west side.
Theirs was one that was already concerning to me. So I don't know that there's anything we can do about it. I mean, people still need to move past, but.
And realistically, when we get to the bridge, we got to tie in on the west side anyway.
Yeah,
that's where the sidewalk is on the bridge. And if you put it on the east side, then you're forcing people to cross at an unsignalized crossing to get to the west side.
Yep.
Well, I do like the size of the buffer, so.
Yeah, that helps.
That helps.
Looks
Go
great.
ahead.
So we don't need any motion or anything on this, right? This was informational. And
I just need to be able to perceive that you're supportive of us taking this approach, and I see that you are, so we will submit that kind of an application.
do we need a yay or nay? Everybody good? Okay. Great, thank you. Oh, mayor's report. That's me. Kevin, thank you.
Yes, thank
and I look forward to getting to know you more.
I appreciate it.
I've only seen you once or twice, but guess you're our contracted engineer, right?
Yes, city engineer, yeah.
Great, thank you. Thanks. My report tonight is, as you know, I've met with each one of you. Robin, we hope to meet in a couple days, getting the feel for where we stand. I've met with many of the residents. I'm meeting with the employees in different departments. I guess it'll be the day after our next council meeting, right, Steve? That's when we 17th and 18th.
Yes, but I got to thinking I better talk to you about that. You may not want to get up that early after a council meeting. We'll talk after.
Oh, okay.
No, now with it, that we have a new mayor, we're going to always be done by 9 p.m. Not an issue.
And so I have some things that I think we're all in agreement on I'd like to see accomplished after meeting with all of you and the employees. I will come to you with more. At the present time, I have also gone out and met with Utopia. I've met with Jan Davis and Birmingham, I forget his first name, Jason, at the Centerpoint Theater. And so I've met with some other, I've met with the religious leaders in town. Need to reach a couple other faiths. I've met with the LDS, Episcopalian, and a couple other religious leaders. And so we're trying to get a good feel of what people throughout the community from all walks of life and different backgrounds feel. I will have, tonight, we have, there's 3 or 4 or so committee positions that have expired that as of 12/31/17, we've reached out to a couple of them and have not heard back. Steve has assured me that we're okay with recommendations on that on the 16th. I just found out about these on last Wednesday, and so I want a chance to talk with them and to see how they felt. And then, of course, each one of you had organizations. I haven't talked with Robin, but I've talked with the rest of you about how you feel about the positions you're in. So I'll be looking at that further as well too. But that's what I'm in the process of doing, and we'll be coming on the 16th with some of those committee appointments and also hopefully more of a feel of what the employees perceive. One thing that I would like to see happen is, and I think a couple of you expressed this as well too. I know in my business and what I do is it's always customer first, and if it's not customer first, I'm fired. And I want to make sure that that we're reaching out, all of us, the city council, all our departments, and making our residents first with customer service and kindness. And so that's what I'm in the process of doing. You don't need to hear from me more tonight. We've heard tons already, but so that's my report for the evening. So I'm just a good look. I'm just excited to work with you. So next thing, city manager's report. Steve, I think you want to summarize and give us some projections, huh? For
well, I think this won't take that long because I don't intend to go through these 2 lists, A and B. They're the kinds of lists that the council members have seen before. I'm just continuing that practice. So if whatever value you can get out of them, great. Maybe the one looking ahead to this year might be of most value to you as you anticipate what we need to accomplish this year. Item C, Jake, would you put up that attachment?
So Steve, can I ask a question?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I ought to know implicitly what every one of the items on especially the 17 list, but also the 18 list are. Most I do. Are these all complete or partially complete? Because I think there's, I guess I'm not sure on a couple of them.
Well, some of those items on the 2017 list are not complete, and you'll see. Hopefully, I tried to be consistent in showing them carrying over on the 18 list as well. But no, it's not just things that have been completed. It's things we've spent time on but are still continuing.
Okay.
And so they've been also added to the 18 list. At least that was my intent. I may have missed something, but.
Okay. Are you planning, and when I first saw this, I thought it was related to that priorities list that you've generally done, I think a little bit later in the spring. Are you planning to do that again this year?
Well, you might be thinking of the council's prioritization
Well, you have
process.
councils and planning commission and integrated them, and we've
And that's up to you and the mayor whether you want to go through that process again this spring. Certainly can. I did, in fact, they noted on the 2018 list that you, under miscellaneous, that conduct a city council goal-setting process, question mark, because I don't know if you want to or not.
We still have plenty of our big goals left from last year. So.
Or you may just have to re-identify and reprioritize or reaffirm what the priorities are. And so one of the selfish reasons for giving you this 2018 list is to help temper your ambition by realizing what we've already got on there, but also to help you weigh in your minds what are the highest priorities here as we as staff struggle to accomplish all these things. What's more important than other things on the list? So you may want to have some kind of a work session in a couple of months to give us more sense of priorities.
I'm always up for more meetings. So.
And longer.
Well, I'm going to suggest a couple here in a minute, George, so just hang on.
It was a softball, Steve. I was trying to give you.
Item C, regarding 1250 West, we continue to work with the owner, the major property owner over there in that area, and UDOT to try to move this forward to where UDOT is willing to transfer the ownership of a piece of that Legacy Parkway corridor to the city. It would become available then for the building of a road someday. We've taken it to this point where the blue represents the area that we're trying to get UDOT to agree to deed to the city. We've negotiated the width of that to some extent. We're not sure UDOT is going to agree ultimately to give us the full 66 feet of right-of-way that we're asking for here. We hope they will. They have raised continually the specter that environmental groups who fought the Legacy Parkway may resist us as well as we try to clear the wetlands. Us or the developer tries to clear the wetlands within this corridor. So we do have an intent to meet with the Army Corps in the near future and feel them out and make sure they understand that there was a settlement agreement 10 years ago that allowed the Legacy Parkway to go forward, which included a provision that 1250 West could be extended for 1,700 feet from 1275 North. And that 1,700 feet takes us past that diagonal drain ditch to where the road could then be turned to the west onto the property, the private property. We'd be out of the Legacy Parkway corridor at that point. So that's what we're focusing on. We are waiting for, our next step would have to be to get a wetlands study. We're hoping that between the developer and UDOT, they will pay for that 1,700 feet, 66 foot wide. And I'm putting the pressure on UDOT to step up for a couple of reasons. One is because, you know, they understand that they made a commitment to allow a road to go here, and yet they, well, I'll be careful about what I say publicly here. Let me just leave it that way. The current Region 1 director, I must say, has been really good to cooperate with us, to arrange several meetings. He's trying to help make this possible, but he's also helping us recognize the reality of dealing with the wetlands. I think we'll eventually get over that hump. But UDOT also has made a promise years ago when the final design of the Legacy Parkway was being approved. UDOT made a promise to us, a commitment that when the frontage road is built through there, when it's extended, if it requires the relocation of the Legacy Parkway Trail, UDOT will pay for that relocation cost. So that's what this would mean. The road corridor you see there is right on top of the existing trail. And that means UDOT would have to move the trail to the east, so they've got to have the benefit of a wetland study, wetland delineation as well, before they could move that trail. Anyway, so we're working these angles with them. We are making progress, and that's probably as much as I can tell you at this point.
So the map that you have up there, the little block of red to the left.
Yeah.
Is that property is that where the road dead ends?
Well, that's just showing you, the red is, the blue is the 1,700 feet basically.
All of the
yeah.
blues. So it's not only gets you past that pipeline, it gets you all the way up. I presume what looks like a road at the right-hand side is the connection to Farmington.
Well, the right-hand side is Centerville, 1275 north, where the bridge over the parkway, and then hangs a hard left to serve the
bridge to nowhere.
To serve the salmon buildings there, and that area.
Over Legacy, right?
Right.
Yes.
So the red is where it would begin to be entirely on private property, the road, where we don't have to deal with UDOT and try to secure more of the Legacy Parkway right-of-way.
So has there been an analysis of what kind of relief this would give to our at-failure overpass? And is that an argument that's being brought into the conversation? Our overpass, which I would consider at failure, I don't know if technically it is, but.
I assume you're saying where people are now trying to get to our frontage road on the east side of the freeway and get up to Farmington.
And that dangerous, shift over to the left as fast as possible in that short section. I just wonder if that should and could be part of the conversation.
Well, we have used the argument that we've got a new high school going in up there on Glover's Lane, and this connection will be another access to and from that area. So as to far as how much relief would it give to those using the east side now, I don't really know, because those who live west of the freeway, of course, can get off up in the Spaghetti Bowl area, I'll call it, and make their way to the west side. So I just don't know how to quantify that. We could use that as one of our arguments, I suppose. But
yeah, I would just bring it up in the conversation. And
I mean, UDOT's committed to deed the corridor to us. We just got to get through these wetland hurdles before they will do that and have a realignment of the trail plan and so forth. Anyway, we're making progress.
Okay.
Steve, is this something that is this what you discussed when you and Mayor Cutler went out there a couple of weeks ago on the UDOT meeting? Or is that something else? Didn't you go with the police chief out there, or was that UTA?
I'm trying to remember which meeting that was. We spent some time walking this area because of drainage concerns.
I guess what I'm asking, is this something that you and the mayor were working on with UDOT, where I need to get with you further on as well?
Well, I'll be glad to brief you on it. I think we probably don't need any more political clout right now to take the next steps, but certainly glad to brief you on it, Mayor. Item D, preparation for the work session with legislators. In 2 weeks, we'll have that dinner work session with them at 5:30.
Are we having lasagna?
What would you, is that our standard? Should
we vote yes or no, Stephanie?
Is that a yes or no? That
anything that will destroy a white shirt.
I'm just asking.
What would you
remember?
want,
It's
Stephanie?
not coming from Marcia any longer.
What do you want?
It's just they made a comment last time.
They did comment about it.
They always get when they come here was.
The senators and the Congress
Was it a good
and
comment or
the
a
representatives did, huh?
So maybe we better do something
They
else,
want a
huh?
fancier dinner because they're fancy.
Well, that's fancier than we do sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. A week from yesterday, or next Monday, is the Utah League of Cities and Towns Legislative Policy Committee, in which they will be giving us the latest briefing of the legislation that is of concern to them. That will be some stuff I can then cull from and send you in advance, kind of a cheat sheet of here's some issues we'd like you to address, we recommend you address. But if there's some issues you want to be sure I include on that, send me an email or talk with me at some point in the next week. But I'll be doing my best to identify those things that I think you should spend your time on addressing with them. Item E, scheduling work sessions. It'd be my recommendation that there's two subjects that we need to get back to, more than two perhaps, but two that involve development, one along Main Street, one along Pages Lane. The South Main Street discussion, as you recall, we had a joint meeting, work session with the Planning Commission, and you agreed that the next step would be to discuss expanding the uses on Main Street, and also discuss design guidelines that would replace the current regulations. And as homework in advance or preparatory work, Corey would send out a straw poll of you and the Planning Commission with the purpose of having each of you identify or reacting to some possible ways of expanding the uses, possible additional uses. He would compile your feedback in advance of the work session. That becomes a substance for you to discuss in that work session, possible ways to add uses to Main Street that are acceptable to you. I asked Corey today, how soon could you get that done? He could do it in time for a work session on Wednesday the 17th if you'd like, but it would be less pressure on him if you did something on Wednesday the 31st of January. Reason I picked those dates as suggestions is because those are Wednesday nights that are not Planning Commission meetings. You could go on, I guess, an off Tuesday night, if you prefer, and invite the Planning Commission to join you on a Tuesday night. So that would be the 23rd, is it? The 20?
Yeah, it's the 23rd. The 9th or the 23rd.
Yeah, the 9th is too soon. That's next week for Corey to do this survey or straw poll, if you will. So you're really looking at probably Wednesday the 17th, Tuesday the 23rd, or Wednesday the 31st would be the nights I would recommend to you. I did suggest to you earlier, in an earlier meeting, that you pick a night you don't have a regular council meeting, because this is one that you need to give yourself some time, the two bodies, to work through. But the other subject, and let me get it out on the table, is the Pages Lane. Corey and I agree that that probably is suitable for a work session prior to a regular meeting. You could do that maybe on February 6th. If you recall, that was general plan amendment that you considered back in November, I think it was. You tabled it, perhaps at least partly at the request of the owner of the property, to allow some more time for other ideas to be considered. And I think you want time to discuss whether you just want to leave it as it's currently zoned, or whether you want to actually move forward with an amendment that allows some other uses other than just the commercial uses. That's my perception of where you ended on that one. So I guess I would suggest you take that up in a work session on February 6th, prior to the council meeting that night, that you find one of these other dates for the joint City Council Planning Commission work session. Neither Corey nor I perceive that you really need to bring the Planning Commission into that subject regarding Pages Lane. They've forwarded you their proposed amendment, and now it's in your lap. So you just need to take some time on that one.
Sure.
Is that all muddy or clear?
That's pretty good.
Okay.
For what it's worth, I am out of town the 23rd through the 1st.
Exact same time. We're going together, I guess, huh, Bill?
Going to Florida?
No, I'm out of town the same time, 23rd to the 1st.
23rd through the 31st, or through the 1st? Through the 1st, okay. So that really says we would need to prepare for the 17th. Corey says he can do it, if that's what you'd like to go for, or we push it into February.
I think it's going to take more than one iteration. Sooner the better.
Yeah.
I agree with George, and I'm available on the 17th.
Okay.
Or I'll make myself available.
Are the rest of you okay for the 17th of January?
I think so.
Could have a dinner for you and schedule like a 6 to 9 block. Does that work, or you just want to go later?
It's fine, make it work.
That works for me.
Like a 6 o'clock?
That one's for Pages?
No, that's for South
Or
Main
Main
Street. And we just pushed Corey. He acknowledged he could do it. They just have to get right on it. Getting out to you a document that you would react to and the Planning Commission would react to. And then he'd compile that as a working document for you in your work session.
It'll work with me unless my husband has the surgery on the 15th, and then I might not be available.
Good point, yeah. What do you, any odds on that?
She's praying for it, but it's not optimistic.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you on that, but I will try my best to be here. If I know it's going to be, I'll let you know as soon as possible.
Okay.
Is this a joint meeting with the Planning Commission?
Yes, this one I understood from your work session with the Planning Commission that we would pull both of you back, both bodies together after doing this preparatory work, this straw poll. Okay, so we'll go at least tentatively with the 17th.
And that's on the South Main Street.
On South Main Street.
Okay.
And February 6th at 5:30 for Pages Lane discussion.
What time's the 17th?
5:30. Oh, 17th would be 6 o'clock.
Technically 6 o'clock.
Any objections other than what the concern Robin has expressed? Okay.
Well, you had one on the 6th too?
Well, on the 6th would be the Pages Lane continuing the discussion by this council, just this body.
Before the city council meeting.
Right, 5:30.
Okay.
That was February what?
Okay. And then the last item, Local Officials Day, the legislature, the deadline to sign up for that. We need to get our registrations in by the 19th of January, so if you wish to go, we'd like you to make that decision and let Mackenzie know by the 17th, Wednesday the 17th.
And what is that date?
It's the 24th, I believe, the Local Officials Day.
Mayor Cutler talked with me about that one. He says he loves going, and I guess one of the council members, or maybe more, have gone in the past. I don't know, you have. I think it's a fabulous opportunity to go up to the legislature, especially when you're going with our youth council. And I'm hoping, I'm out of town, as it sounds like Bill is as well too, but I'm hoping that there's some of you council members, or at least one, or maybe two, could do it. But
yeah,
if we can't, do other city officials go?
Well, I could go, and I've done so in the past sometimes. I didn't go last year, but I think Tammy went last year, if I'm not mistaken, and the mayor. We sit at the same table with our youth council, and then we try to get one or two of our legislators to sit with us during that lunchtime. It's in a practical sense, you're not going to get much lobbying, if any lobbying, done on that day by going to the Capitol. They really emphasize the youth council program at the Capitol, and then the official program, formal program for you elected officials starts at, I think it's 11 o'clock, with a legislative briefing at the Salt Palace, which is where the lunch will be held also. So,
I cannot go,
okay.
so.
I'll check my schedule.
Tammy, possibly?
Possible.
Okay. Okay, if you have until 17th to decide, and then we'll send in registration. Okay, the thing that's not listed there, I mentioned earlier, the lunch for Marcia next week on Wednesday, the 10th at noon. If any of you would like to come, would you just let me know so we can kind of get the best count we can? We're inviting city employees to come. Marcia did not want a public reception, so instead we're going to have this luncheon for her.
As you know, I'm unavailable. I'm flying to California for our son's wedding, but.
Right.
So
any of the rest of you want to be there, let me know.
I would like to be there.
Shall I just count on you, Stephanie? Okay.
And that'll be here.
Yeah, right in here.
When is that again?
On Robin's birthday.
I would be able to sneak in for the last 20 minutes.
Plan on you to eat or not?
So you don't need to plan a
Okay.
seat for me. I'll just sneak in and say hi and give her a hug.
All right.
That's this Wednesday?
The 10th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you
I'll
like,
let you know if I can be there.
Okay.
would you like to have us there?
I think it's optional. You've had a chance tonight to thank her and give her the plaque, so this is optional. What she really appreciates is having lunch with those that she has worked with over the years.
yes.
But any of you are certainly welcome to be there as well. Okay, that's it for me.
And when I say last 20 minutes, I'm assuming it's an hour event. So I could
Yeah.
be there about 12:40.
Okay, yeah, I expect about an hour, yeah.
Okay, closed meeting. Do we have any need for closed meeting?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Number 11 then, any other business, any other items?
I did have some questions on 11. As I was reviewing, a lot of these are, need to be done by resolution. In the case where we have a term that's ending either with the end of the mayor's term or like in the Wasatch Integrated Waste, that was done by resolution. Are we, since we don't have anyone who's going to be filling those slots potentially before the, do you just notify Wasatch Integrated and the other agencies that those are currently vacant, that do not plan on an attendee, or how does that work out?
That's a question I ask also of our city attorney, whether we, whether you.
Yeah, it depends on if there's an applicable statutory provision that says either you have to be an elected official and now they're not, then no, they couldn't continue to serve. Or is there a statute that says it's a set term? But there's also a concept known as, you know, you're in de facto, you're still, because nobody else has been appointed, so we need somebody to fill it. So no, I did not go and look at each of these. I was waiting for some information like this. I also need to look at the resolutions. It depends on the resolution, whether or not the resolution had a set date. But I think for 14 days, if there's a meeting, you can send the current person to fill in so that we can be informed, and then we will appoint them as soon as possible thereafter.
It might be, I mean, technically speaking, whether your vote may not count, I don't know. In some of these cases.
Well, that's really my only concern is if any of these require
so do any of you
representative
have
vote. I don't know specifically which one would be, because, you know, like the mosquito abatement is a board that has representation that they do vote. I don't know if some of these are just informational that we're concerned about one way or another, or if we can just say to, you know, South Davis Metro Fire, there is no de facto representation until this meeting, so we are automatically absent.
Yeah.
I can help you out there on a couple of them.
Okay.
I do plan on being on South Davis Metro.
Sure. I mean, that was just an example of that, but any of these where we won't have it voted in by resolution, I just want to make sure that we're at least at a minimum notifying if, for all I know, John may be on vacation, at least at a minimum notifying those that we do not have a current appointee for, that there is
I'm
no
assuming,
attendance.
hopefully this will be done on the 16th. So
Yes.
between now and then, if you attend a meeting let me know and we can chat about it, or you can do what George is suggesting and just, if there's a vote on something serious, raise your hand and say, hey, I
Yeah.
may not be.
For
able to
example,
vote.
the Fire District Board, Fire Agency, Service Area Board meets this time on the second Monday, which is next Monday.
They do.
And I spoke with the fire chief today. He called and asked the question, will we have somebody appointed? I said, not tonight, probably. I was anticipating that the mayor would probably serve on it. And so the chief understands that if you're there to participate in the discussion and learn, but want not to vote.
Oh, yes, then that's an interesting distinction. Then what I was talking about, the de facto, is that you were appointed and you're continuing to, for 2 more weeks, but a new person would not have that authority.
But if I went with him, then could we vote because I'm the alternative?
You're listed as an alternate.
That's
on
true.
Because I'm
this.
listed as an alternate.
Yeah.
So I could go with him and vote.
I don't think it's a huge exposure. I just wanted to make sure that we were covered.
Well, and it's true for, their attorney probably wants to know, yes, they,
Whether the
you
votes
could at
count.
least bring it up if it's a serious vote that they're taking, but.
Yeah. The Recreation District Board is going to meet before we have our next council meeting, so that's another situation. But
So it sounds like there's less than a handful, potentially.
yeah.
Okay.
If you're concerned about the fire board one, I planned on doing that with your approval, I guess.
Yeah, we have to do it by resolution though,
Yeah.
Mayor, so we'll have to bring.
So you'd have to put that on the agenda.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn public. Thanks for being easy on me.
Exactly
By
9
1
o'clock.
minute.
Yeah.
Nine.
Very supportive
Second.
public.
Yes, Mayor.
All in favor, aye. Adjourn.
You're welcome.
And the next meeting